everyone, to another episode of Aquarian Insights. And today I'm very excited to have Nigel with me. And Nigel is the founder of Higher Healths. And Higher Healths is an amazing company doing beautiful work in the arena of organ meats. So today, Nigel and I are going to talk about all things regenerative farming, cattle production, and organ meats for our health. So thank you, Nigel, and welcome.
Brendan, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and it's nice too speaking to a fellow Canadian, so that's always fun.
That's right. Two fellow Canadians living in the US.
I know. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of what Higher Health's mission is and what inspired you to sort of start this company?
Higher Health's mission is connecting people to real food. It's it catches me off guard every once in a while when I just sit back and I think about our mission of connecting people to real food. But it is so because there's a lot of things in our food supply that I don't know how they're even called foods. It's
Right.
become very toxic, very convoluted. It's amazing the products that are in there that people are considering food and that are consuming. So what we're trying to do is just connect people to real food again. And as you mentioned, organ meats, it's been a long time since people have eaten the whole animal and seen value in the whole animal. And so we're trying to drive that back in. It's not just ribeyes and some ground beef that are important or good for you. There's many more pieces of that animal. The whole thing has
Yeah.
value. And so that's what we're trying to do. And in terms of how this whole thing got started was a very personal battle of mine trying to get my wife to consume organ meats. We're getting ready to build a family, and at a bare minimum for me, it's like, well, we want to eat like 2 years in advance, getting the bodies ready, but bare minimum is 5 months. Let's go. We really got to get you eating the most nutrient dense portions of the animal, which is the organ meats. And no matter how I prepared it, no matter how I cooked it, I just failed. There was no way to get her to consume them. So it all ended up getting right down to encapsulation. And I got like this little 50 cap and quick capsule maker, that I could do this. And this was my home run. She's like, I'll have it like this all day long. So, and it was like a raw organ meat. It was very pure, very powerful. So I was super happy. It was great. My wife is now eating the most nutrient dense portions of the animal. She's going to have a much better pregnancy. And then the baby that we have is going to have much better building blocks because this placenta is going to have everything that it needs to pull from. So, that was my mission. That was my job. I wanted to do the best that I possibly could by my family, and
Mhm.
that was ensuring that they had organ meats in their diet. So, and at the time, Brendan, I had a small nutrition practice going on where I was doing one-on-one consulting. And so I did a little test drive. I passed it around and I had, you know, some clients that had pretty decent diets, some not great, that really needed a lot of help. I had others though that were really dialed in, whether it was keto. I had one that was doing carnivore. LeVay was doing carnivore. I had a couple people doing paleo, and they were just they've been interested in nutrition for a long time,
Mhm.
dialing things in. They moved well, they worked out, they moved a lot, did sports. And what I didn't expect was the feedback coming back in from all of these different kind of walks of life that really caught me off guard. I couldn't believe what we were seeing. And it made me realize how nutritionally deficient we are. And that included some of my most dialed in clients. So when I had them asking for more and then giving me just unsolicited feedback, like, hey, do you have more? Because my energy is greater. Tony was like, I'm sleeping, man. What is it about the liver that's in there, or the heart that's in there, that's allowing me to sleep more? Digestive issues. Nadia, who's going, my hair and my nails are amazing. What's going on? So yeah, it was really something to see that, and it was alarming to see that so many people were nutritionally deficient. So that's when this whole thing started. I saw a better way to add value to people's lives.
Yeah.
And Like, well, if they're not going to do this on their own, and I don't know about you, but with my nutrition practice, I had always lost the battle with them to get them to eat whole animal. So
Oh, big
this
time.
was it. Yeah. So that was the beginning of it.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing because I think in Canada and the US, our grandparents ate the whole animal a lot of the time, and just we've moved away from that so much. But when you go to butcher shops, even in England, but in Europe and Asia, whole animal is just what everyone does, and I think we're all missing massive components of that in the West. So I think this is a very, very valuable thing. And when we're talking about organs, people always bring up, potential issues with consuming organs from animals and all of these things. And I think you've had this question a lot. And to me, it always comes down to a question of quality. So could you speak to a little bit kind of where you're sourcing your materials from and how that process works?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really great question that people are asking. So I don't blame them for 1 second for
Right.
asking. I
Of
think
course.
I hope people ask that about their vegetables as well. Like
Right.
quality most certainly matters. And one thing that I would like to say, just to kind of iron that out, that I let people know is that it, the whole animal obviously is fully connected. So if the organ meats are not healthy, what makes the other muscle meat healthy? You know, if the and when it comes to the animal, I'd say if there was a standout part of the animal that you really do want to ensure is clean, it's the adipose tissue, the fat. That's where a lot of the toxins get stored. And there's fat on almost every single cut of meat that you're going to grab. A lot of your ground beef, you're going to have that. So that's really important stuff. And then um, let's we'll dive into kind of how cattle are finished in North America. We can do that. So what it is every cow is grass fed. They're all pretty much in the pasture, and but how they're finished is where everything counts, right? So what they do in conventionally raised cattle is that they finish them anywhere typically in between 90 to 120 days in a feedlot. And big beef commodities, well, it's all about weight. We got to get this thing as big as we possibly can to make the most amount of dollars from our beef program. So we got to fatten this thing up as fast as we possibly can. So we put it in this feedlot. We give it grains. Now, grains or corn, these are not native foods to cattle. So just like human beings, you're going to get sick. So if all you ate was McDonald's and the buns and French fries, like you will get sick.
Right.
What's that McDonald's documentary that guy did? It
Oh,
was
supersize
uh,
me?
Super Size Me. There you go. He kind of finished him off. I don't know. I can't remember how many months the guy lasted, but he almost did like a human finishing program there on himself.
Yeah.
So that's what we do with cattle to put the most amount of size on them. But the problem with those feeds as well is, yeah, they make the cattle sick, so they have to load them up with antibiotics typically as well,
Mhm.
just to keep them upright and finish them off. So, but what happens to the animal is they get sick, and so the muscle meat diminishes in quality. The fat turns color. It retains toxins instead of being loaded full of amazing, wonderful fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K. You end up with toxins instead as a trade off. And then, yeah, the organ meats themselves are are brutal. They're almost unusable because they have fatty liver. Same thing that happens to human beings as well. We get fatty liver. The hearts become so congested with adipose tissue. So there's fat inside the heart and then surrounding the heart. It almost becomes unusable. You can barely see any red functioning muscle meat. It's just caked in fat. And the same thing happens in our heart as well.
Yeah.
So, the whole animal gets sick from that standpoint with that kind of finishing program. So what we do is we work with farmers that are regenerative farmers. So what that means is they look after both soil, both the land and the animals properly, and they're very much connected. So you never want to do damage to the soil, and so that you'll never see pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, or rodenticides, or anything like that being sprayed on the land. They Most of the farmers the farmers, they don't use any products that interfere with the bacteria in the soil. A popular one like ivermectin, that they'll put on cattle for parasites, that can fall off the coat and end up on the soil, and it'll kill the microbes, the bacteria that's necessary in the soil, impacting the quality of the grasses that the cattle are then eating. So instead, they stick with natural things that work just as good if they end up with a pesticide or um, any sort of oh gosh, kind of bugs or anything like that they're dealing with. Um, and they'll use sea salt or apple cider vinegar,
Yep.
things like that are going to help uh, remediate that. So they never want to interfere with any of the health of the soil. And then same goes for the animal. They never want to interfere with that. So the cattle take longer to finish, whereas you've got conventionally raised cattle. You can get yearlings in there, 9 months, and fatten them right up. Well, the cattle that regenerative farmers that do only grass fed and grass finished, again, the important part, grass finished programs, well, their cattle take longer to get that full size that are then ready for slaughter
Yeah.
for their beef programs. So they're getting into that closer to that 2 year mark for those cattle. But what's everything's better from bones to meat to fat tissue. Everything is better when they've been raised that way. The nutritional quality is night and day. The omega fatty acids are night and day. Everything is just on a better scale nutritionally from a quality perspective when you're looking at a grass finished cow that's coming from very fertile living soils that have not been interacted or interfered with by human chemicals of any sort.
Yeah, and I think that's a super important distinction because it's one thing to, try and treat the cows right, but I always tell people for us, like we can't, on many levels, we can't separate ourselves from our environment. So if our environment's sick, well, then we're going to become sick. And so all of this newfound conversation around health and food and all of these things with new administration coming in, I'm like, that's great, but we have to take care of our soils, and regenerative farming is the sustainable way to do that. And then that feeds into a healthy animal, which leads us to get healthy products. So I think that's a wonderful thing that you're sourcing. And is most of the sourcing done in the US?
Yeah, so how we operate, we've got two companies now. So one in Canada, and
Mhm.
so the Canadian one, we only source from regenerative grass-fed, grass-finished programs in Canada from Canadian farmers, and then we've done the exact same thing in the US. And so currently, all of our products out of the US is from regenerative farms right here in Montana. So I've got major trust issues, Brendan, when it comes to food supply. I might have told you this when I met you in Orlando.
Right.
And I need to know who my farmers are. I need to walk the land. I need to actually see, am I going to see, pesticides on here? What products are you using? What's going on, and walk the land with the farmer, see the animals, see the paddocks. Where are they feeding? What's that look like? Is it alive or is it dead? Are the cattle sitting on monocrop,
Mm.
and given the old pasture, oh, they're pasture raised 100%, but they're feeding for a period of time on monocrops, whatever it is.
Right.
And so I have to be able to have that direct connection with them and relationship with them. So that's how we operate in both the US and Canada, is one-on-one with them, where we build a relationship. And that goes back to our mission of connecting people to real food.
Yeah.
Well, our our customers deserve the right to know who the farmer is and what their farming practices are. So we're fully transparent with that, because just even from a spiritual standpoint, I think it's important to be able to give thanks for your food. And part of that
Oh,
is knowing where it
absolutely.
came from and who put in the hard work to end up on your plate, right? So that's important for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we've all not been taught unless we grew up on a farm is how there's so many levels to these things, and there's certain practices in farming, especially cattle farming, that are allowed, but they're not healthy for the animal and they're not healthy for the end product. So that becomes a very, very important thing. And the funny thing is, my family, we purchased a cow and we have a friend of ours that's raising it for us right now. And a lot of people are like, "Oh my goodness, you know, you're going to butcher a cow. You know it. You've seen it." And I'm like, "How could you do that?" And I said, "Well, how could you go to the store and get random cow from some farm you don't know? I know exactly what this cow's eating. I know it's getting treated well. I know what, you know, everything about the cow, so I have full confidence it's going to live a beautiful life. And when it's done, I can give thanks every day for feeding my family." And that's how we ate forever, and basically until the last sort of 150 years. And so it's really interesting that we're so disconnected from our food now, that people struggle with sort of conceptualizing that. And I think it's an important thing to bring people back to that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we get into it. They're emotional conversations for a lot of people.
Hmm.
But if you look at the extractive model, and let me just go ahead and pick on vegans or vegetarians for a moment with that extractive model, that monocrop agriculture, for those crops, uh, that involves a lot of death. Like you have to destroy an entire habitat. You have to beat back all of nature so that you can have one plant for that wheat plant or that soy or whatever it is. And you really do have to connect yourself with how that is made and the death that is required for that, right? Like everything must die for one thing to survive. And that's where the birth of chemicals came in. Big Ag's got, pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides for all of that. All of those animals, those creatures and insects have to die or that monocrop. So, yeah, that disconnection is is a sad thing, really. But yeah, here you are raising one animal, giving it the best life you possibly can, and it's serving a great purpose. And that goes for hunting as well.
Yep.
Hunting, if you've got a good shot anyway, could be a wonderful exit for that animal because in nature, dying in nature can be very rough. Like a wolf is not going to be any kinder than a
Correct.
bullet. I guarantee you. So yeah,
Absolutely correct. Y- Yeah, and I think, you know, it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, because when we can start changing consumer habits, then that feeds backwards into farmers realizing that this is what people want, and it makes it beneficial to go that route, because that's a lot of times people will say, "Oh, it's too expensive to do it like that," or all of these things. And I think that's misguided, because long term, it's much more fruitful to have a regenerative farm. It might be more cost prohibitive in the beginning, but just slowly killing the land that you're raising animals on, I don't think helps long term. And you just have to add more chemicals and all these other things into it as years go on, and then eventually it becomes untenable.
yeah, that's right. It really is a system that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You're going to poison your community for a period of time, which will have a deadline because the land can only handle so much. You can only extract so much from it. And there's going to be the end of the road. It has to happen. Where a regenerative model is where you're keeping things in that community. It's imagining a world where you shopped nowhere but Amazon. Amazon takes, and now there's no local community.
Right.
There's no local farmers. You don't get to go to Farmer Joe for your milk. You don't get to go to Susan for your eggs, and you don't get to go to Farmer Bob for your meat. No, it's all got to go to the big conglomerate, right? So, those regenerative models keep communities and as well as the soil and the overall ecosystem intact and together so that it all works. And that's the biggest difference is that when you create a regenerative model where there's an ecosystem at play, you get to see all the creatures welcomed back into the land again.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I love to encourage people that, man, if you're short on visiting farms, maybe you haven't been to one in a while, go check out some of the big monocrops and just have a look at it. Like there's not much for animals on that land. There's no birds working around there. There's no bees. There's not much for insects in the ground. And that's one big thing that you'll see in regenerative farming. If you've got cattle in a monocrop situation versus a regenerative situation. Well, in a monocrop, that you've got drier soil, you don't have insects in there, so you see these huge cow patties sitting there for months, right? But in a regenerative model, you've got insects and you've got rodents. Like it gets worked into the ground. It does not survive, and there's plants growing out of it, and the whole thing. So there's a very alive model that we need to support for both our community, our ecosystem, and our health. And it's night and day difference.
Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation because for me, I consider ourselves sort of stewards of the earth. And there's so much stuff in mainstream media now that, like, oh, we have to obfuscate our thinking and ability to these large conglomerates, and we have to eat fake food and all of this garbage. And I've bucked against that for years and years and years, and will continue to, just because I think we are supposed to have a symbiotic relationship with our environment around us. And when we just go with sort of the Amazons of agriculture, that doesn't help anybody, and we get into big trouble really quick. And I always tell people in America, well, and Canada too, is a large part of it is we're overfed and undernourished. And that's because we're just eating food that looks like food, but it's not. And I mean, even the stuff you get at the grocery store, when I was a kid, you can go to the grocery store now and get sort of the same thing, but it doesn't taste the same. It doesn't taste as good. It doesn't taste the same. There's no nutrients in it, and all these things is because we've been forced to change agriculture practices so much that I think this regenerative farming thing is incredibly important, um, and for community as well. And I think also with this in the push for environmentalism and all of these things is regenerative farming is the most environmentally friendly thing that you can do. And I know cattle in general have gotten a terrible name in the last, couple of years and blamed for all sorts of crazy things. If you want to talk about that, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
In terms of how cows are getting blamed for
Yeah,
those
just
things.
for the whole climate change conversation and how everyone wants to stop all of the farming and all of these things.
Yeah, I mean it's super wild. I've gotten into these conversations just a couple times, but imagine that ruminant animals are not welcome because of the gases that they're giving off, and that in any way, shape, or form, or chemically, that those gases are the same as the the outputs of a vehicle, a carbon monoxide. Like, how did that work in there? And the methane is completely broken down with Mother Nature, and it's like the next step is looking at the oceans. You've got all those mollusks, like you've got your clams and oysters. They produce methane. You've got just Mother Nature itself has all sorts of methane producers. Why is that now the enemy? Is just absolute insanity. But yeah, the farmers are getting hit really hard. And
Yeah.
in fact, it's in New Zealand right now that they've brought up, taxation on cow farts and burps, and they're looking to cull herds, in Ireland and New Zealand, and these are measures that are built on complete insanity with no. These are the follow the science folks, not following any science at all. And it's fascinating to imagine that we can do better than nature can with things coming out of the lab, right? And we've seen this over the past few years, a huge push. We see the power that big pharmaceuticals have, the weight that they have with the dollars that they have, trying to convince us that health can come from a vaccine, from a vial, you know, versus food.
Mhm.
That they have finally created health in the lab with a pharmaceutical drug that you're in no way, shape, or form deficient from, that you don't need, that none of your cells require for life, but all the life giving foods that nature has and has provided for since the beginning of time is now the evil guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a mind blowing conversation that, and again, I think for a lot of people to just help them walk through this conversation, if
Mhm.
they're wondering if the WEF and the WHO is right on taxation of farts and cow burps and culling herds, if they're wondering if they're right or if the farmer's right, just go get out of the city, go to the farm, and just have a look at what's creating life and what is destroying life. And that should be a pretty good picture for you to now start to ask quality questions to figure this thing out. And not enough people are doing that. They're just going to their grocery store and they're getting food and they're listening to marketing. And I see this all the time too within the supplement industry because
Mhm.
we fall into the supplement industry, but we're actually just food. Like
Right.
our product is 100% organ meat inside of a 100% bovine collagen, gelatin capsule. We're just real food, but we fall into the supplement category, and we get to see this lack of transparency in the supplement industry all the time. You go and you buy a bottle of whatever it is, and right up front, they tell you, well, it's a proprietary blend. So they're saying, no, Brendan, you don't get to know what's in this here, but listen to us. This is really important for your health. You need this.
Yeah.
What is in it? Well, we can't tell you that bit, right? So uh, the transparency is not there. So going to the farms and just see it with your eyes. They're not going to lie to you. You'll see what a life cycle is, what an ecosystem is, and what is actually disrupting that, what we require for life. So yeah, that's such a wild one for me. The the whole life cycle of methane and how that's become demonized, and how meat in general has been demonized, and somehow this extractive monocrop agriculture where you've got Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger,
Right.
which these guys at the end of the day are just trying to sell you more processed food.
Mhm.
There's, what is it, 22 ingredients to make a Beyond Meat burger. They will make you sick. They will make you unhealthy. And I'm sure Big Pharma is all for that because they trust in a sick care model. They have said as much, you know, making people healthy. They have literally said it out loud. That's their quiet part out loud, that it is not profitable for them. It's not a profitable model.
No.
So sick care is what the model is. And I'm sure Beyond Meat and Impossible Burger fit right in there perfectly.
Yeah, they do. And that's a perfect thing. And I think your comment about the supplement industry too is, I give folks supplements, but most of them are just very expensive garbage, to be honest, because sourcing is a problem, transparency is a problem, all of these things. And I think what I always tell folks is to assume that we're smarter than nature is foolish, and nature always has the answer for us. And so a big part of for us, what we use is we utilize glandulars, and then we use plants and herbs and different things in different forms because that's what nature has given us to heal ourselves. And a lot of it centers around food. And, on this podcast, we haven't talked about a food a lot because for better or for worse, I take it for granted because it's always been such a foundational thing for me growing up on a farm and just being raised the way that I was. But it's such an important conversation to have. And specifically around glandulars, can you give us a little bit for people to understand why they're so important? And even for higher health, like what's included in glandulars for you? Is that liver? Is that heart? Like what's involved there?
Yeah, so we're talking about a food now that has been prized by our ancestors.
Mhm.
You know, they are super important foods. Unfortunately, they fell out of favor. You know, sometime in the 50s, they fell out of the food pyramid, and you know, I my 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 catchphrase is, you know, McDonald's rolled into town, and the favor of organ meats fell out. Like our palates completely changed. And we got, again, it plays into that disconnection. Like we don't even know that the healthiest, most nutrient dense portions are those prized, you know, very sacred organ meats. The whole animal that was raised had value, you know, and we've gone away from that. And so has our health. And so now that we're not including the whole animal, we're pretty much forced to go to the local supplement shop and now aim to put those vitamins and minerals back in because our diet is now deficient in them. And it's so silly because, you know, like you just said, and my thing is from the land, not the lab.
Right.
We cannot do what nature does. And as smart as these scientists are, and my hat's off to them, they are very smart individuals. They will never outsmart Mother Nature on this one. Nature's got it all figured out. Anytime that we've ever tried to mimic what nature's done, we've butchered it very badly. And there's always something missing. And that's why you see like these pharmaceutical, like, for example, one of my favorite ones is our beef liver. We're able to get the low iron or anemic folks off of a pharmaceutical with our 2.2 milligrams found in 6 capsules of beef liver,
Yeah.
right? Get them off of major high dosage milligrams of pharmaceutical options because the body doesn't recognize those, doesn't know what to do with those. And no matter what fancy stuff you did in the lab, you unfortunately failed to do what Mother Nature does. And mimicking it was, you fell way short. So, uh, you know, getting the most nutrient dense portions of the animal back into the diet is just, I think it's super important. And the more and the further we go down this road of nutrient deficiencies and the poorer the quality of our food goes,
Hmm.
the more that we just need to get back to
Right.
how our ancestors ate, which was, you know, and nutrition's not supposed to be difficult. Like our ancestors were nutritionists. They were the experts. They ate it all. They weren't confused. And now today, people don't even know what real food is. They have
No.
no idea. And we're no longer experts. Everybody should be an expert in real food. You know, it shouldn't take going to a university to figure this thing out to be healthy. No, this is a God-given right. It was always there. Uh, and it's gotten so confusing though because of these companies and the marketing that's out there, and people starting to rely on convenience factors, processed food, and labeling it as food when it's not actually food. You know, food colorant doesn't is not a thing. Like it shouldn't be a thing anyways.
Right.
And so we've just gotten confused on what that is. And so what higher health does is we're just getting people reconnected to those most vital parts for good health so that people can stop relying on the lab, you know, and stop relying on synthetics that don't absorb properly, that are wrong in the dosages that they have because they need massive dosages because absorption is so poor, you know. And so people are really, they're wasting their money and they're wasting their health. And some of these multivitamins, multiminerals, in some cases they're actually leaching minerals because of
Yep.
the imbalances that they're providing. Whereas if we can just go back to real food, we can take the brain work out of it, out of what nature's done that we've failed to duplicate, and acquire health back. It's going back to the families of having a family cow, and not going to the grocery store to get their milk and their butter and their cheese, and then, their meats as well, right? The most nutrient dense portions.
Right. And I think one thing that people don't understand too is when we consume healthy animal, our body knows what to do with that. And we can get better very, very quickly because instead of a lot of times with supplementation and pharmaceuticals and these kind of things, our body has to figure out how to metabolize these things properly. And we kind of cross our fingers that it's going to work out and it's going to have the intended effect. Versus when we eat real food or we take something like a glandular of yours, your body instantly knows what to do with it. And so if we're having liver problems or other organ problems and we're consuming those organs, your body's like, thank you very much. I'm going to use exactly what I need from that. And there's no extra work that needs to be done by the body versus when we take all this other stuff, we're kind of crossing our fingers that it works on many levels, right?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Brendan. It's that it's bioavailable. The body recognizes exactly what it is, and so there's no additional work necessary for converting it into a usable format.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very handy. It's super important that we have those foods in our diet for our body to just relax, absorb, heal, and improve. And that's also what we do. I'll mention to you and the audience listening too is this also falls back on my trust issues is that I can't have a third party manufacturer make our supplements because most third party manufacturers have to put either a filler in there or a flow agent, which is like an anti caking agent. But this is required because most supplement companies, well, they've got millions of capsules to do in a day, right? And with that, these things need anti caking agents for these machines that they're encapsulating in. Well, ours is all done in house. It's all handmade. And so we 100% know we don't need a filler. We don't need an anti caking agent for ours. It's just real food. And so I think the more that we can stop putting things in the way of our diet, of our bodies to heal as well, right? With these fillers, with these flow agents, for our body to have to process this and deal with it. No, our bodies almost never relax anymore because we've always got this input of toxin of, thing that our body can't use, doesn't need, would rather never see. So it's never relaxing and just absorbing good, high quality nutrition to do its thing. And so, again, this is why we see chronic illness across the board. And one thing that really concerns me is our fertility rates and our testosterone levels going down, down, down. And all we need is actual building blocks, which we get from good, high quality food.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point because, your impetus to start this company, in many ways was impetus why I started Aquarian was to help our wives and get them to be healthy. And a huge part of that is real food. I mean, when I met my wife, she had never really eaten anything other than a steak on as far as beef and never had raw milk or anything like that. And I gently coerced her into all of that. And the change that people can see is so incredible. And everyone almost that comes into my office is nutrient depleted on some level. And to your point, it doesn't matter if they're eating better or exercising and trying to eat better and stuff. There's just these fundamental, long-standing nutrient deficiencies that cause real problems, and so many things can be fixed with something like a well-sourced glandular like yours. It's a night and day difference. It's such an amazing thing.
Yeah. Well, hey, hats off to you. That's the ultimate man move there to get your wife onto
Wow.
meat and dairy like that. That's good.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it helps because she's a O negative blood type, and I know again there's a lot of controversy about blood types, but most women that I know that are O negative can eat a couple of steaks, that's for sure. So
yeah.
that's really cool. And I think with glandulars too, and you touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to tease it out a little bit more. A lot of people are concerned with liver because they say, oh, liver, there's a misunderstanding that, oh, there's toxins in the liver and all of these other issues. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the most important thing to know about the liver is that it it does a two-phase process where it filters the blood. And so it processes it and then it moves it along. So it's not actually a storehouse. It's not a warehouse for toxins. It's not where they stay. So if you've got an unhealthy animal or, you as a human being, if you're unhealthy, that liver's going to help process that blood and move toxins along and prep them for clearance, right? So it's not going to hang on to it. But when you're so sick and you're eating so bad and you're drinking horrible things, that things get uh, full of toxins and backed up, and that's where you're going to see illness shortly follow along as well. You're creating imbalances, and then you're creating communication issues within the body. Now, these organs are unable to communicate with each other as properly as they should, and promote hormone production, and it's just a whole cascade effect that happens. But ultimately, the biggest thing for folks to understand about organs is that they don't just store toxins; they process them, move them along. So it's just it goes back again to the quality of the animal and the quality of your food matters, right? You don't want a toxin-rich animal, and it doesn't matter if you're eating the liver or the ribeye. Ultimately, and yeah. Does it matter? Is it a little bit more sensitive when it comes to organs? Yeah, I would argue for sure it is. But at the end of the day, uh, it all gets completely flipped when you're eating a really healthy animal,
Yeah.
like 100% grass fed, grass finished. Now, instead of a warehouse of toxins, which it isn't, it does become a warehouse for really high quality vitamins and minerals and cofactors,
Yeah.
unlike anything else that you're going to see in the animal, which is why they've always been prized and still are in some tribes and in the animal kingdom as well. You see this becoming, and like in lions or excuse me, wolves. A lot of people talk about this in correlation with liver or killer whales. But wolves, it's expected mothers and alpha males that get first dibs on those organs.
Mhm.
And oftentimes you'll see many of carcasses where it's just organs are gone and the leftover, the carrion, is there for scavenger animals to complete. They've just taken the organs and they've left. These are very nutrient dense portions of the animal when it comes from an animal that's been raised properly.
Yeah, and that's such an important point. And I think it's funny that we've all sort of been tricked in many ways to pay $27 a pound for the leftovers that we shouldn't be eating, right? And one of the things that you brought up that's so important to understand is the adipose tissue or the fat is primarily where a lot of the toxins are stored. And so if we're concerned about animals being toxic and all of these different things, well, then mitigating any kind of fatty cut of meat, which is very hard to do, would be far more important than any of the organ meats. I think that's an incredibly important point that people don't necessarily understand.
Yeah, that's right. And it literally alters the omega 6 and 3 balance within the animal too.
Hmm.
So it diminishes in quality that way. Yeah, you got diminished vitamins that are going to be now found in the animal. So your overall quality, without a doubt, is not great. And then you really do have to be concerned about the toxins that are now in that fat tissue of the animal. You, you know, So yeah, that's super important. And then and then cholesterol, as you know, has been demonized since the 80s.
Mhm.
And this is so important for our building blocks for hormone production. And so getting that fat into your diet is really important. But here we are, you know, eating conventionally raised animals that are finished on this garbage that uh there you go. There's toxin rich fat that's in there, and it's disrupting everything.
Yeah. And so I think this is such an important conversation, and I always think about the fact that people need to be reminded more than they need to be taught. And then so constantly reminding people that, hey, eat real food. Sometimes I feel like a broken record because I tell everyone that over and over and over again. And to your point, there's so much confusion because people are like, oh, should I be vegan? Should I be this? Should I be that? And it can be as simple as real food with organs as a staple. And I think what you've done with Higher Health is so cool because your wife's not alone in that most people don't want to sit down and have liver and onions anymore. That's not really what people are keen to do, right? So having the capsules is such a beautiful, important thing. And I think for you with Higher Health, like going forward as we progress through time, kind of what's your hope for the company and what's your hope for people to kind of take away from this and utilize?
Yeah, well, thank you. Higher Health is going to be recognized as one of those brands that, because we're coming up with a few different products that's in the lineup. We're working on our meat sticks. And I don't know if you ever got one of those in Orlando when I saw you, but
No,
we
I'm excited to try those though. My goodness.
yeah, they're fantastic. They went off really good with those that did. I initially just brought them in for snacks and a couple tasters or whatever, but yeah, the idea with that product kind of gives you an idea of our brand is, like you, I've got two kids. You hit a road trip, and in no time flat, they're
Oh,
screaming because they're hungry, and they want a snack, and your options are so limited. It's so much work being a parent and
yeah.
policing the foods that are going into the house and into the vehicle, and there's just an abundant amount of options. And then further to that, to make it difficult on everyone, parents included, of course, is that you find a healthy company, and then the next year, like, you better make sure to keep looking at the labels, because next year maybe they added something or switched
Right.
something or whatever. And you went from like, oh, I love this company, I love their stuff, and then you turn it over and you see the lip. Why did they? Whoa! Why did they add canola oil? Or how did? Why did they need to do this? Or
Yeah.
since when did they have food colorant in this, or whatever it is. So it's exhausting. So I want parents to just throw the meat sticks right in the back seat of the kids and
Mhm.
not think about it. We want to build everything with the farms that we work with, so full trust model, so you get to know which farms that we're working with. uh you know feel we're one of the only one that I know of anyway, in terms of like supplement companies, where come on in, you're in the Columbia Falls, come on in this area here, and I'll tour you around. I'll let you make your own capsules if you want. We'll get you all geared up, and we'll
Cool.
do that. You can see our freezers. We get the organ meats direct from the farmers. They go right into our freezers. We do every single step of the process, right to the labeling and bottling and shipping to our customers. So
Mhm.
it's all done in house. That way, there's no guesswork. I'm able to speak to every single step of the process, just like our farmers can, because they know
Right.
exactly what's going on in the land. Well, we know what's going on in here, to ensure that we've got a high quality product that has not been tampered with. So the in the coming years, we're going to be just that recognized brand that you can trust, finally, that has not been greenwashed. And if somebody wants to cut me $1 billion check, uh, in the contract, it's going to have to say that I'm allowed to shout from the rooftops that I collected the billion, and all of my customers are no longer able to trust Higher Healths. Like it's, but Likely not going to happen. We want it needs to be a product that I can continuously feed my family, which
Right.
is why I started in the first place. And so that's the future for Higher Health. We'll be adding on, and because we're a whole animal company, so my goal is for our regenerative farmers to make more per head so that they're sustainable, and we can see some more sustainable farms popping up in both America and in Canada, and so that we can have healthier communities, healthier families, and they're supported in that sense. So we're a whole animal company. We plan on harvesting as much as we possibly can. Now, for that to happen, there's definitely some battles to be won in both the US and in Canada, because our government has a lot of red tape on what we can and cannot harvest.
Yeah.
So essentially, they're able to tell the farmers what they can and cannot sell of their cow, which
Mhm.
is sick and wrong in my opinion.
I
And
agree.
so, for example, the thyroid. Why can't we harvest the thyroid at most of the facilities? No, if you've got a struggling thyroid, or maybe you've had your thyroid removed, you have to go with the synthetic one that works uh, barely at all, comes with side effects, as opposed to eating thyroid to heal up and make get you back to normal, right? So we want to provide more of the animal, and we will in the future. We'll have those battles out, and continue to provide a product that families in the US and Canada can rely on for the health of their family, for continued fertility, so that we can see the next generations with health, and a new path is formed.
No, that's so cool, Nigel. And I think once you have kids, you're like, okay, I got to do something because, the world is a very different place than it was when we were kids. And it's one thing to sort of sit around and complain and say, oh, it used to be this or it should be this or whatever, but you're actually out there doing something. So absolutely hats off to you. That's amazing. And I think this becomes such a cool thing because you're supporting local farms, you're creating jobs, you're doing all these beautiful things and providing a product that is healthy and nutritious and that people desperately need nowadays. So that's an incredible job. That's really cool.
Thank you, Brennan. Appreciate it, man. And yeah, same as you. Like we hit it off because in Orlando we discovered you're a practitioner, and there wasn't a whole lot that I said that we were like, yeah, no, I don't agree with that. No, we were on the same page immediately, and uh, we love that. It's being able to partner up with great folks like yourself and spread the word and make healthier families and
Yeah.
get people back into control. Because we're the last stop, especially like you
Yeah.
said, you get kids involved. No one's going to look after your kid like you, and so
Nope.
you've got to ensure that what goes into the house, what goes into your fridge and freezer, you know what it is, and you can trust that you've got a healthy family to build. So
Absolutely. And Nigel, before you go, where can people find out about Higher Healths and where can they order some of your amazing product?
yeah, so if you're in the beautiful United States of America, head on over to Higher Healths. That's Higher Healths with an S at the end.com, and you'll find our website. We've got a small blog growing there, and again, all of the farms are located right in Montana, so you're getting high quality meat right out of Montana here, and we're shipping all across the U.S. And with that, folks, get off of a lot of the synthetic uh, pharmaceuticals, the synthetic multivitamins, multiminerals. Save yourself some money, and then if I had one more message for folks, grab yourself a freezer, get to know a local farmer, and get your quarter or half cow that way. Save some money.
Yeah.
But you can find us higherhealths.com. If you're Canadian listening to this, higherhealths.ca. And then in terms of our social, it's Higher Healths USA. You'll find that on Instagram, Facebook, and then if you guys do need anything, feel free to reach through Brennan or reach myself, Nigel at higherhealths.com. Be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Oh, awesome, Nigel. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Brennan. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.